Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to another episode of Read With Me. I'm yours truly, Isabel Bedell, and I'm here to read with you. I am so excited for this particular read with me because we're going to be talking about the law of priorities. And if you are a visionary, if you are a person of forward thinking and you're consistently a very creative person as well, this is a law that you and I, we have to be very, very, very much aware of, because sometimes we might get so caught up in our amazing ideas that are so incredible and world changing, obviously, that we might not see the levels of priorities that we need to assess in order for the bigger impact to happen faster than what we want. And I know if you're anything like me, we expect things done by yesterday. So this particular chapter, I'm really excited to dig deep about. The last particular chapter was amazing. It was the law of the big Mo, which to me is everything. And I really enjoyed that. I hope you're enjoying this particular book. We're in chapter 17, which is the law of priorities, the 17th law out of the 21 laws, irrefutable laws of leadership in this book. And I'm super, super pumped about it. We're almost done with this book. Crazy. So 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. 5 more chapters and we're done with this book. So let's get into it. We're going to really be just taking things to the next level with next month with the books that we're going to be reading. And I'm so excited for you to stick around because 90% of the time is just showing up. So if you're able to show up, be open-minded, and receive, you're way ahead of the game, okay? So let's get into it. The law of priorities. Leaders understand that activity is not necessarily accomplishment. Leaders understand that activity is not necessarily accomplishment. Leaders never advance to a point where they no longer need to prioritize. It's something that good leaders keep doing. Whether they're leading a billion-dollar corporation, running a small business, pastoring a church, coaching a team, or leading a small group, I think good leaders intuitively know that to be true. However, not every leader practices discipline of prioritizing. Why? Well, I believe there are a few reasons. First, we are so busy. We naturally believe that we are achieving. When we're so busy, we naturally believe that we are achieving, but busyness does not equal productivity. Activity is not necessarily accomplishment. Second, prioritizing requires leaders to continuously think ahead and to know what's important. So to know what's next, to see how everything relates to the overall vision, that's hard work. Third, prioritizing causes us to do things that are the least comfortable and sometimes downright painful. Time to rethink priorities. I know the pain of reprioritizing from personal experience. In 1996, I was living in San Diego, which is one of my favorite places on the planet. San Diego is a gorgeous city, which one of the best climates in the world. And if you live in San Diego, you can be on the beach in minutes or on the ski slopes in hours. The city has culture, professional sporting teams, and fine restaurants. It's a place where you can play golf year-round. Why would I ever want to leave a place like that? Well, I expect to live there the rest of my life. It was very comfortable, but the leadership has nothing to do with comfort and everything has to do with progress. Leadership has nothing to do with comfort and everything to do with progress. Back then, I spent a lot of time on airplanes. Living in San Diego, I spent entire days traveling to airline hubs like Dallas, Chicago, and Atlanta just to make connections. Most of my speaking and consulting work was east of the Mississippi River, and the travel was taking a toll. I knew in my gut that I needed to make changes, so I asked Linda, my assistant, to figure out exactly how much time I was spending traveling. What I learned shocked me. In the previous year, I had spent equivalent of 27 full days traveling back and forth and just between San Diego and Dallas to make flight connections. It made me realize that I needed to sit down and reevaluate my priorities. But if I was going to live consistently with the priorities I had established for myself, I was going to have to move myself and my companies to one of the hub cities. Author Stephen Covey says a leader is the one who climbs the tallest tree, surveys the entire situation, and yells, "Wrong jungle." I felt a little like that when I realized that what we were about to do. After a lot of research, we settled on Atlanta. It was a major airline hub, and from there, I would be able to reach 80% of the people in the United States within 2 hours by plane. And the area is beautiful, offering excellent cultural, recreational, and entertainment opportunities to employees. I knew people could live there well. I would not be able, it would not be an easy move, but it was a necessary one. It's been 10 years since we made that move, and you may ask, was it worth it? My answer is an emphatic yes. Atlanta is a business friendly area. The cost of living is very reasonable compared to other larger cities. And most important for me and for the consultants who work for my company, travel has become so much easier. Most of the time, I can travel, speak, and return home the same day. And as a result, my productivity has skyrocketed. Can you imagine getting 27 days of your life back every single year? In the in the 10 years since the move, I've gained 270 days. A normal work year for most people is 250 days. And it's like I've had an extra year added to the most productive time of my life. And there's nothing like being at home with my wife at the end of the day of traveling instead of being in a hotel room. Here are the 3 R's. Leaders can't afford to just think inside the box. Sometimes they need to reinvent the box or blow it up. Executive and author Max Dupree says, the first responsibility of a leader is to define reality. That requires the law of priorities. When you're the leader, everything is on the table. And every year, I spend about 2 weeks in December reevaluating my priorities. I review the previous year's schedule. I look at my upcoming commitments. I evaluate my life. I think about my goals. I look at the big picture of what I'm doing to make sure that I'm willing, that I'm living my way of living lines up with my values and priorities. And one of the guiding principles I use during this process is the Pareto principle. I've often taught it to people at leadership conferences over the years, and I also explain it in depth in my book, Developing the Leader Within You. The idea is this: if you focus your attention on the activities that rank in the top 20% in terms of importance, you will have 80% return on your effort. Let me read that again. The idea is this: if you focus your attention on the activities that rank in the 20% in terms of importance, you will have an 80% return on your effort. So for example, if you have 10 employees, you should give 80% of your time and attention to the best 2. And if you have 100 customers, the top 20 will provide you with 80% of your business. So focus on them. If your to-do list has 10 items on it, the 2 most important ones will give you 80% of return of your time. If you haven't already observed this phenomenon, test it out and you'll see that it really plays out that way. 1 year, as I went through this process, I realized that I had to totally refocus and restructure one of my organizations. The other guidelines I use whenever I evaluate my priorities are the 3 R's. No, not reading, writing, or arithmetic. My 3 R's are requirement, return, and reward. I believe that to be effective, leaders must order their lives according to these 3 questions. What is required? We're all accountable to somebody for the work that we do, an employer, a board of directors, stockholders, the government, and so on. And we have the responsibility for the important people in our lives, such as spouse, children, parents. And for that reason, any list of priorities must begin with what is required of us. And the question I ask myself is, what must I do that nobody can or should do for me? Great question. What must I do that nobody can or should do for me? As I've gotten older, the list has gotten shorter and shorter. And if I'm doing something that's not necessary, I should eliminate. If I'm doing something that's necessary but not required of me personally, I need to delegate it. What gives the greatest return? As a leader, this is number 2. What gives the greatest return? As a leader, you should spend most of your time working in the areas of your greatest strengths. Marcus Buckingham and Donald O. Clifton have done extensive research on this subject, which you can read about in their book, Now Discover Your Strengths. People are more productive and more content when their work is within their natural gifting and strengths. And ideally, leaders get out of their comfort zone, but stay in their strength zone. What's the practical application for this? Here's my rule of thumb. If something I'm doing can be done 80% as well by someone else, I delegate it. If something I'm doing can be done 80% well by someone else, I delegate it. And if you have a responsibility that someone else could, according to that standard, or could potentially meet that standard, then develop and train that person to handle it. And just because you can do something does not mean that you should do it. And remember, leaders understand that activity is not required necessarily accomplishment. That's the law of priorities. Number 3, what brings the greatest reward? The final question relates to personal satisfaction. Tim Redmond, president of Redmond Leadership Institute, observed, "There are many things that will catch my eye, but there are only a few things that will catch my heart. Life is too short not to do the things that you love." And I love teaching leadership. I love writing and speaking. I love spending time with my wife, children, and grandchildren. I love playing golf. No matter what else I do, I will make time for those things. And they are the firelighters in my life, and they energize me and they keep me passionate. And passion provides me the fuel in a person's life to keep going. Reordering priorities. A few years ago, when I went through this process of reprioritizing, I revisited the way I was spending my time. Back when I wrote the first edition of this book, I determined to spend my work time according to the following guideline. The 4 areas was leadership, communicating, creating, and networking. And then the time allocated to leadership was 19%, communicating was 38%, 3 was creating, which was 31%, and then networking was 12%. These 4 areas represent my greatest strengths. They are the most rewarding aspects of my career. And for many years, my responsibilities to my companies were aligned with them. However, I was recently reviewing these areas. I realized that I was not maintaining the balance I desired. I was spending too much time in hands-on leadership at one of my companies, and it was taking away from higher priorities. And once again, I had to recognize that activity is not necessarily accomplishment. I knew I was in for another difficult business decision. If I was going to continue to be effective in fulfilling my vision, I would have to change and work according to the law of priorities. I made the decision to sell one of my companies. It wasn't easy, but it was the right thing to do for me. Refocusing on a worldwide scale. It is the responsibility of leaders to make tough decisions based on priorities, and that can sometimes make them unpopular. Back in 1981, when Jack Welch became chairman and CEO of General Electric, it was a good company. It had a 90-year history. The company stock traded for $4 a share, and the company was worth about $12 billion. 11th best on the stock market. It was a huge, diverse company that included 350 strategic businesses, But Welch believes that the company could become better. And what was his strategy? He used the law of priorities. And within a few months of taking over the company, he began what was called the hardware revolution. It changed the entire profile and focus of the company. And Welch said this: to the hundreds of businesses and product lines that made up the company, we applied a single criterion. Can they be number one or number two of whatever they do in the world marketplace? Of the 348 businesses or product lines that could not, we closed some of and divested others. Their sale brought in almost 10 billion. We invested 18 billion in the ones that remained and further strengthened them with 17 billion worth of acquisitions. We remained aside from a few relatively small supporting operations, our 14 world-class businesses, all well positioned for the 90s, each one either first or second in the world market in which it participates. And I know Welch is out of favor in some circles, and recently his methods have been criticized, but his leadership was right for his time and situation. He reprioritized GE, and his strong leadership and focus paid incredible dividends. And during his tenure, GE stocks experienced a 2-to-1 split 4 times, and it traded at more than $80 per share when he retired. The company was ranked as the nation's most admired company, and according to Fortune, it continues to be one of the most valuable companies in the world. That came about because of Welch's ability to use the law of priorities in his leadership. He never mistook activity for accomplishment, and he knew that the greatest success comes from only when you focus your people on what really matters. Priorities here the name of his game. Priorities were the name of his game. Examine the lives of all effective leaders, and you will see them putting priorities into action. Every time Norman Trostikov assumed a new command, he didn't just rely on the leadership intuition, he also re-examined the unit's priorities. And when Explorer Roald Emerson succeeded in taking his team to the South Pole and back, it was due in part to his ability to set the right priorities. Successful leaders live according to the law of priorities, and they recognize that activity is not necessarily accomplishment. But the best leaders seem to be able to get the laws of priorities to work for them by satisfying multiple priorities with each activity. The best leaders seem to be able to get the law of priorities to work for them by satisfying multiple priorities within each activity. This actually enables them to increase their focus while reducing their number of actions. A leader who has a master, who was a master that was one of my idols, John Wooden, the former head basketball coach of UCLA Bruins. He is called the Wizard of Westwood because the amazing feats he accomplished in the world of college sports were so incredible that they seemed to be magical. Evidence of Wooden's ability to make the law of priorities work for him could be seen in the way he approached basketball practice. Wooden claimed that he learned some of his methods from watching Frank Leaney, the great former Notre Dame head football coach. He said, I often went to his Leahy's practice and observed how he broke them into periods. Then I would go home and analyze why he did certain ways. And as a player, I realized that there was a great deal of time wasted. Lee's concepts reinforced my ideas and helped in the ultimate development of who and what I do now. Everything has a purpose based on priorities. People who have served in the military say that they often have to hurry up and wait. That seems to be true in sports too. Coaches ask their players to work their hearts out 1 minute and then stand around doing nothing the next. But that's not the way Wooden worked. He orchestrated every moment of practice and planned each activity with the specific purposes in mind. He employed economy of motion. He Here's how he worked. Every year, Wooden determined a list of overall priorities for the team based on observations from the season previously. Those items might include objectives such as build confidence in Drolliger and Ignoroff, or use 3-on-2 continuity drill at least 3 times a week. And usually he had about a dozen or so items that he wanted to work on throughout the season. But Wooden also reviewed his agenda for his teams every day. And each morning, he and his assistant meticulously planned the day's practice. They usually spent 2 hours strategizing for a practice that might not even last that long. He drew ideas from notes jotted on 3x5 cards that he always carried with him. He planned every drill minute by minute and recorded the information in a notebook prior to practice. Wooden once boasted that if you asked what his team was doing on a specific day at 3 o'clock in 1963, he could tell you precisely what drill his team was running. And like good old players, Wooden did the work of thinking ahead for his team. Wooden always maintained his focus, and he found ways for players to do the same thing. His special talent was for addressing several priorities areas at once. And for example, to help players work on their free throws, something that many of them found tedious, Wooden instituted a free throw shooting policy during scrimmages that would encourage them to concentrate and improve instead of just making the time. The sooner a sidelined player made a set of number of free throws, the sooner he could get back into action, and Wooden continuously changed the number of shots required of the guards, forwards, and centers so the team members rotated in and out of different rates. The way everyone, regardless of the position or starting status, got experience playing together, a critical priority for Wooden's development of total teamwork. The most remarkable aspect about John Wooden, in the most telling ability, his ability to focus on his priorities, is that he never scouted opposing teams. Instead, he focused on getting his players to reach their potential. And he addressed those things through practice and personal interaction with the players. It was never his goal to win championships or even beat the other team. His desire was to get each player and person to play at his potential and put the best possible team on the floor. And of course, Wooden's results were incredible. In more than 40 years of coaching, he had only one losing season, his first, and he led his UCLA team to 4 undefeated seasons and a record of 10 NCAA championships. No other college team has ever come close. Wooden was a great leader. He just might be the finest person to coach any sport. Why? Because every day he lived by the law of priorities, and we should strive to do the same. Here's how you can apply the law of priorities into your life. 1, are you prepared to really shake up your life and get out of your comfort zone in order to live and work according to your priorities? Is there something in your life that is working so poorly that you intuitively know it will require a major revision in how you do things? What is that something? Describe how it's not working. Describe why it's not working. Describe the how and the why it's not working. Can you think outside the box or create a new box to solve that issue and realign your priorities? Ignoring a major alignment problem is your priorities is like lining up a golf shot incorrectly. And the farther you hit the ball, the more off course it will be, the longer you live out of alignment, and the greater the chance you will miss achieving your vision. Number 2, if you have never done so before, take the time to write out your answers to the 3 questions, the R questions. Be sure to include family and other responsibilities, not just your career. What is required of me? What gives the greatest return? And what brings the greatest reward? Once you have answered these 3 questions, create a list of the things you are doing that don't fit solidly into one of the 3 R's. You need to delegate or eliminate these things. Successful people live according to the laws of priorities, and successful leaders help their organization, department, or even team live according to the law of priorities. And as the leader, you have taking responsibility for prioritizing and thinking ahead of your area of responsibility. Have you carved out a specific time on a regular basis to revisit priorities for that area? If not, you need to start doing so immediately. As a leader, it's not enough for you to be successful. You need to help your people be successful. Wow. That was awesome. That was an awesome, awesome chapter. Perfectly aligned to what's happening in my life. Once again, this book has definitely aligned with my life continuously. It always continues to amaze me how, John Maxwell has such a simple way of teaching leadership in such a straightforward approach. You don't necessarily have to be like a guru or have to be in like a huge organization to understand the power of leadership. You can apply it right now in your life, in your business, within your family. You can start now. So that's a huge affirmation, confirmation, thanks to the law of priorities, that everything is possible. You just need to organize your life. Just get it down. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I hope you have an amazing day. And I shall talk to you soon. Bye.